Hello, everybody. This is Kunal Jain again from HBMA Live. How are you guys doing in the year 2022? Well, I know we all are very excited to see another year ahead, and hopefully, it would be we would not have to deal with pandemic as much as we dealt in last 1 year. Well, all good things are happening around us, and one of the best thing which has happened for us in the year 2021 um, is one of I would tell you this is a personal story. We invested into a startup in the healthcare field, and this is a practice management company a few years ago. And today on HBMA Live, I wanted to do a session for our healthcare entrepreneurs and uh, billing management company owners and entrepreneurs to understand how this investing works. And sometimes the ideas fail, sometimes ideas succeed. This is one of the success stories which we have right in front of us. I'm going to interview Ajit Viswanathan, whom I have an opportunity to know for last 5 years. It's a fantastic story of success in practice management and digital health and healthcare informatics world. So it is something worth for people who are attending to listen and cherish and understand the pillars of this healthcare innovation framework, how it works, and how this young man has succeeded understanding it and implementing it well in his business model. So without giving much details, I'm going to invite Ajit Vishwanathan, who is my friend. Ajit, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kunal. Good, very kind words, but really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for showing up. Ajit is very humble man. I can tell you that. So, Ajit, tell me the little bit. Well, I wanted to ask you a lot of questions, but the first thing, tell us, when did Doctible start, and what was the idea behind it?
And thanks for having me on HBMA. Really appreciate inviting me today. So Doctible started nearly 8 years back at this point. So it was late 2013. And my prior background, I used to work in a company that dealt with bill review. So if someone got into an auto vehicle accident and they submitted a bill to a healthcare provider, and so I was seeing how still private practices, which was primarily who I was dealing with, it was not efficient, and people were still using paper, and in terms of like discovery of patients, it was still very archaic. And so from there, I had an idea that, look, what if we can find, and my initial, to your point about successes and failures, we went through multiple pivots before we got to the eventual one that landed on us. And so my initial perspective was, look, can we find a way for practices to be able to have their patients upload their bills and then be able to negotiate and say that, look, I can give you a prompt pay discount and make things just a lot more easier to get them to get paid faster. So that was the first iteration in late 2013 that me and my co-founder started on. My co-founder had worked at a different startup, and so I knew all the things on the business
How did
side.
you
Or
gather so much courage to leave your job and put everything on a stake? And that's something which people normally don't have. And I know that's something I really wanted to understand from your perspective at that time. Were you still an immigrant, or you were on H-1 visa, or what was your
I
situation?
was, and that those are all things that you're looking at your risk profile. So I was on an H-1B visa, which is for the folks who may
Which is
not know.
very risky too.
Yeah, which is
But
even more risky. It's a work-based employer visa, so you're tied to the employer at that time. I'd applied for a green card as part of that at the employer, and it was coming through, but it was taking a long time. I mean, it takes 6 to 8 years for the green card to come through, and I was like in year six, and for me, it was very frustrating because my perspective was, how many times in your life you're going to get an idea that you want to start a company on, and so
right.
for me, I'd got to the point where I was going to take the risk and leave my job and just deal with the ramifications of what's going to happen. And I was prepared for that. And
That
sometimes,
was very profound, I can tell you,
eh,
because not many people have the courage to leave and come out of the comfort zone, especially for the H1 scenario. So that was very commanding. I really
No,
appreciate it.
I just felt that I felt it's funny because
You
I
were
felt the
determined. You were like, kind of, I have to do this. I have to solve this problem. It's in the doctor's office. We have to get it going.
and the thing is, I've so much believed in the idea, which turned out to be not a good idea at all. But I was so convinced that this was a great idea that I was going to do it. Now, luckily and very fortunately, right about a month before I'd put a deadline to quit, my green card came through
Oh
in the
man.
mail, right? So
So you
and
got lucky.
I got extremely lucky in the process because the green card allows you to not be
Right.
tied to a employer. You
Right.
can now start a company on your own. And so, luckily, I did not have to find out what would have happened if I
Right.
quit on an H-1B. But I think to your earlier point, that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. Being here in US is, it gives you the element of taking a risk and having success, or to your point, also having failure. But I also I did a analysis of, like, I was at a stage of my life where I felt that I could take the risk, have it fail, and still re-enter the workforce and and recover from it. Whereas as the years go by, the opportunity cost becomes more expensive, right? I mean, as you become older, your salary is much higher, and the risk is much more substantive at that point. So I felt that at that stage, both me and my co-founder could quit our jobs and go 3-4 years. And our perspective was, what is the worst thing that would happen? We file for bankruptcy and we'll start over again. And so that's kind of like the reason, the impetus behind why we started in 2013. We found out very quickly, and this is some advice I always give to entrepreneurs, is that listen to the market. The market will guide you. Don't be so dogmatic on your belief systems of why you think your idea is the
How many
best.
times did you change your belief system?
We had to change it 3 times.
Okay. And you met
And
me, what, in 2013? That's when we met.
we met in 2016. So
16.
it was,
Okay, so you were
yeah,
already raising funds until for 3 years.
for 3 years, right? So I think now you have core beliefs that won't change, but your product and your company is going to evolve under you. And so within about 6 months, we found that that first iteration was a terrible idea for various reasons. We could not get patients to upload their bills, and so we said, okay, what can we do next? Now our customers were saying that, look, at that time, direct pay, cash-based healthcare was starting to pay a lot more attention because high deductibles. And so we said, what if we build an Orbitz-like healthcare website where patients could come on the site, they could see what the pricing is, and then they could, just book an appointment, just like retail healthcare.
Yeah.
And we heard it enough from our doctors saying, hey, if you bring a cash patient, we'd really like that. And so we built a healthcare marketplace, and we're based in San Diego. We built that. Again, the naivety was, I thought I was going to raise investor capital.
Yeah.
I recruited my co-founder, saying to him in 2013 that, look, in 3 months, I'll raise investor capital. So we all did that until we found out that raising money from investors, especially back in 2014, 15, takes a lot of time. And it took us 18 months before we actually raised our first round of capital, which during that time you're paying the bills, all of those things, somehow you're figuring things out.
You were just doing it by yourself between you two
We were,
partners. And
we were bootstrapped at the time.
Team. Who was building the product?
So my co-founder is my CTO.
He was building.
So he was building the software.
Working from home and building the product and sustaining. Were you married at that time?
I had just about to, so I was not yet.
Okay.
So
I heard you've become a dad now, right?
No, not me. Someone else.
There was some good news you told me about it when you called me. What's this? You got married eventually, right?
Eventually, back in the journey, at the start of the journey, but
okay,
not up recently.
Okay. So tell me, were you able to determine? How did you determine that in the third time that the reimbursement model, because it's very important for the healthcare startups. And I've learned it in Harvard that, if you are not able to figure out the reimbursement model, who's going to pay for your startup? No matter how innovative you are, you're not going to be successful, because any innovation has to be paid by either insurance company, patients, providers, somebody has to pay. So I remember your early idea was that Google reputation management, and that's what you started, right? That was started paying the bills. So
that was the third
That
pivot.
was the
Yes.
third one which worked.
Yep, that worked.
So how did you determine that this is going to work?
So that the answer to that lied in our second pivot. So when we were building the healthcare marketplace, and not to bore with all the details, we were seeing that we could not just build that into a sustainable company. And we were seeing that our providers and doctors were leaving that marketplace because they couldn't see enough patients to justify the cost.
Right.
And so we said, what if we design software that can be provided to them for free at that time so that they can stay in the marketplace? And then we started seeing that they really love this software, which is essentially reputation management. We were asking patients how their experience was, and then based on that, we'd direct them to the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. So we saw that there's such high engagement on that software piece. So we said, why are we focusing on this marketplace? And so early 2016, we just cut the company into half and said, we're just going to take this Google reputation management, build it as a software, and then and we knew that we had to make money somehow. And we saw, where did we provide value and to whom? We saw that this software provided value to the doctor, to the practice, because it helped them have a better online reputation, which brought in new patients. It provided feedback from patients back to the practice. So we knew that the value was not to the patient per se, but it was to the practice, and that's who would pay for the software. So
the practice, the physicians will pay to get their health. So was there any kind of unique patent, any technology?
No. We started off with, we said, can we just sell this, right? I mean, go to market is so essential. I know a lot of times we get stuck up on
just
patents.
the functionality. You said that we have to come up with a functionality. I know in last 5 years there's a lot of functionalities came up, services came up, who does the reputation management.
Correct.
And then
so that's why we were not too worried about like patents and the intellectual property, because to your point, many people have now come and done it. In healthcare, speed to market is very important. Now, there are definitely areas of healthcare where patents and IP is critical. We felt that in SaaS, digital health patient engagement, speed is a lot more important. And so we started with that. And then what we did was we said, initially we started with a very low price point. We did not want price to be a barrier to our doctors. We wanted to make sure that we can learn from them. We wanted to integrate with the different practice management softwares. We wanted to hone in on the different specialties. And so over the course of the next few months, we found out that healthcare is such a broad range, right? Who do we target? And so focus is very critical. We found out that the efficiency of us selling into a primary care was a lot lesser than, for example, selling into more retail healthcare situations like dentists, optometrists. And so we found out that that's the direction that we're going to change to, which is just really hone down into a few subspecialties and start really good at that.
So a lot of startups want to hear this. How do you, because when you are two founders and did you have some more investors by that time, or you were still two decision makers?
By 2016, we had raised about $700,000 as a seed round. So we did have like a board investor, board member, but they were very much like, they knew that we were still figuring things out, right? By no means we had everything.
I remember that. I remember our conversation at that time.
Yep. That's right when I met you too, right? So like in mid 2016.
So how did you figure out that these physicians are going to stick around if we continue to build this platform and give them fantastic service? Because from 5 practices to 5,000 practices in 5 years, it's a fantastic journey. It's all about marketing and speed, as you said. So I really want to hear, what did you do and how did you determine that this is all about sales, marketing, speeding up? So share something about that part, because that's marketing and sales is like key. And if you cannot scale your startup, you are done.
Yeah, and I know there's multiple schools of thoughts on this. Right. I would say that in our world, initially, every dollar that we had, that dollar we invested inside sales at that time. Now, that's not to say that we did not invest in our product at all, but we were always under a very we used the minimum sellable product approach, which is what is the most basic we could do? Not minimum viable, but minimum sellable, right? What is the most basic product that we
Not
can
minimum
design?
viable, minimum sellable. That's a
Yeah,
great
what
advice.
could I go and sell into a practice
Yeah.
and be able to deploy it where at this case, the practice sees value. And so, for example, we saw at that time that you had to integrate with the practice management software or the EMRs. That was a non-starter because you don't want to add a workflow into a practice. And so we spent a lot of effort from a dev perspective integrating with these softwares. But the softwares itself, we didn't want to go and design the most complex piece of software that we could not sell. We said
Right.
we're going to go sell first, and then
Right.
we're going to iterate on the software. So I would say that
I
most
like that.
startups, right? If you if and look, it's a little bit of cart before the horse, but
Right.
every time we design a new product, we say that we're going to go sell it first, and then we're going to go and continue to enhance the product. And so that would be my advice: is that
Minimum sellable. That's a
minimum.
fantastic line. I like it. I'm running it.
And then now to your other question, it is also important to retain these customers, right? If you
Right.
just sold a product that was pretty suboptimal, churn for any digital health company is going to be the lifeblood as you grow. Growth is important, but retention is even more critical. And how do you do that? Well, you got to provide value in your product. They got to see that this is helping them,
This is
but
working.
also this is working for them. You got to provide them with great
How did you
support.
guys how did you guys show it to them? Did you have meetings with them, reporting, or were they
No,
realizing that they were getting enough patients? What was your
so your product, because we're a very transactional sale and our price points are low, we could not afford an account manager relationship base where we had to call them every month. That
correct?
was just not, like, we were bringing in 200 new practices a month at that time, and it's just not possible for us
How
to.
were they coming to you? Were you doing internet marketing, or what did you
No,
guys
we
do with marketing?
we used to do inside sales. So inside sales is where we'd call
Did you
into
hire
practices.
salespeople at that time?
Correct. So we had a
Door
team
to
of about,
door? No,
not door to door, just all phone based.
call phone based.
Phone
And
based.
what did you do? Like bring the directories of the phone directories from
Yeah,
various
so
places?
from Google and Facebook, like, so we consulted all that, and then our sales people would essentially call into their practices, they'd pitch the solution, and then a certain number would buy. And so it became a pretty well-oiled sales engine where we could tell that this month, because we have this many reps, this many practices are going to join our network, right? And so
Were they based on commission only, or how did you
no,
build
it's
that team?
base plus commission.
Based on
So
commission.
yeah, it's a base plus commission, and so they're all in-house for us. So we built that whole sales team, and so that allowed us to bring in high volume of practices. So it was not possible for us to have a relationship based approach with the clients, but what we did was our product would kind of like give them the analytics that they need. Like, they would see the success of the product by use of the product. It was all automated. So that's kind of like how we did it. But also at the same time, we started building other products. And so we started with only one product at the time, but we knew, and that's what's called the land and expand model, which is you land into the practice with one product, but then you expand multiple other products into it. So now you're a trusted vendor, right? Now they know who Doctible is once you're inside the practice. So 2-3 months later, we'd call and saying, "Hey, look, what are you doing about your texting and your two-way communication?" And they would say, "We're using phone calls." And so they say, "Hey, we have to consider texting, and let me show you a demo." And so that's kind of like how we really did the approach where our inside sales team will bring in a customer on the reputation product, but our account sales team will work to expand that customer to some of our other products. So now we have, like, for example, 7 to 8 different products. So it really is a very comprehensive suite of patient engagement tools
How many
that
employees you have?
we have close to about 60 employees right now.
60 employees. What's the valuation of your company?
we went through a transaction recently, so it's confidential, but you know it because you're
Yeah.
an investor.
Uh-huh.
But I
Well,
can
the
tell you that
ballpark, like what's a public, do you have any public figures for the company, or like public profile?
I mean, we do close to $10 million in annual recurring subscription in terms of,
Subscription.
it's called ARR. And
ARR.
so that's the recurring revenue of our business, and so that's obviously a pretty good benchmark. That
So you were leading that entire sales and marketing, or so you had somebody, or so the question is, most people think as founders, should they be leading the charge of sales and marketing themselves, or they should hire somebody in a process and find somebody who can lead if they cannot do it? What advice do you have on that front for the people?
It will depend on the stage of the company, but in my case, that I was very fortunate and lucky that in the beginning, I had someone who had done this and who was a
So you
successful
had
entrepreneur
somebody.
who had come in to build the whole ecosystem. And then he handed me the keys to that engine about a year and a half, 2 years in, and then I maintained and developed from that engine,
That's a
right? So
fantastic scenario.
yeah, so it really, like, I would advise most founders to not do it yourself. It's just because you have other things to do. You're not just the sales,
Right,
head of sales in that situation.
right.
So you do need someone, really helping you manage that team. I mean, we had a team of 30 sales reps, right? And that's a
Out of
pretty
60
substantial,
or 30, so 50%
half,
of it is all
fifty
sales.
percent, fifty
This is
percent was
fantastic.
sales, right?
And that's the reason of this result. So what do you think about this Google Analytics, AdWords, SEO? A lot of people invest their money into all those marketing lead generation efforts. What's your take on that?
I didn't know marketing well enough, and so and I was just talking to an entrepreneur just before this call. I was telling, because he was going through something very similar, and I mentioned to him is that if you look at an iceberg, the internet marketing, Google, SEO, it's important, but they typically target the top of the iceberg because that's more where the doctor has to go and is searching. And so, if they are looking for your services, they're going to find it. It's important, no doubt, but most doctors are not online searching for services. So the bottom of the iceberg, we felt that we could target, and marketing was not going to reach them. And the only way to reach them was to call these practices. So we just felt that, and we had raised very little capital at the time. We did not have a way to invest in both. As we said, where can we invest where it could be predictable, where it can be scalable? And we felt that building an inside sales engine was there. So now there are some companies that have very successfully done the opposite, where they
Right.
invest in marketing. It
Mhm.
just was not our forte to
Correct.
invest in marketing.
Did you get any support from your private investors and institutional capital? Because when you continue to raise funds, did you ever say no to any investor? What was your process of interviewing them, talking to them, or soliciting? Because that was very streamlined. I'm very, very surprised, and I'm very what I saw in last 5 years with your company. Your processes are very streamlined, and even if your dividends and other things are very streamlined. So how did you guys come up with this? Do you have a dedicated CFO or any companies did you have? How did you guys do it?
I mean, I was the acting CFO, so
Oh, so
so
you
since,
knew the drill.
so I mean, I wouldn't say I claim to know the drill. I started learning the drill through the process. In terms of like investors, look, at the early stage of the company, we were, I'm not sure to say, we were desperate for cash. We would talk to anyone at that point. But as we were maturing, we realized that we wanted to bring in people who understood the industry, just like when you and I met. You understand, you were in healthcare,
Right.
so we started honing down into people who had peripheral or some direct relationships who could help us, who also understood how companies are built, right? Like I would tell you, like, I really value our relationship because, Kunal, like, we've been through a lot of ups and downs. I mean, like,
Right.
yes, we're a success story at the end, but you didn't come in every 6 months and saying, hey, what's going on? Like,
Right.
you kind of like let us be, right? Like, you
Right,
let us
right,
figure
right.
out how we run through, and
So
I
it's
really
very
appreciate
important to give it space.
it.
So
Absolutely, right? Because
investor and startup relationship should not be like a spouse relationship
no,
every day.
and I cannot emphasize how important that one was because
As
um,
in when.
I think you knew that I was
Right.
working as hard as I could to
Right.
build the company and be
No, I
successful.
always believed in the concept. So when you came to me, I always believed that's the one thing because for me it was very important in any healthcare startup that if you, I knew that the concept has a reimbursement part to it, tied to it. Either insurance will pay, provider will pay. They both have deep pockets. Patients don't want to pay anything.
They don't want to
So
pay. Yeah,
if you
yeah,
would have told me your previous two pivots, probably I would not have agreed.
yep,
But
yep.
when you came up with the third pivot that you have something for the provider, I said, well, they have deep pockets. They can pay as long as your solution works. So I think
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened.
But that's critical that you understood that, and that's why you gave the space, and that's why it's fortunate that all of our investors now. How do you also continue to have that trust? Like as you know, I used to provide quarterly updates.
Right.
We're always
Which is very,
transparent,
which was very
right?
nice.
We tell the good, the bad, the ugly, so you knew exactly where we're coming through. So I think that it all comes down to communication and making sure that you're not left wondering, like you don't want me to reach out to you only when I need to raise more capital,
That's right.
right? That's what a lot of entrepreneurs sometimes unfortunately do is it's radio silence, and then suddenly you reach out and then you find out that they're raising a round. You want them to know throughout the process of what's going on in the company, and then that, look, I know what's happening with Doctible, I know what the metrics look like. And so I think that was very important for us, was to make sure that our investors who trusted in us, right? And for me, it was very important that I provided a return to our investors, so they're kept up to date. And like for example, COVID happened. It was an extremely tough time for pretty much every company and startup and people out there. And I think we're very transparent to our investors, saying that we're not sure, how this is going to shake out. I mean, 2 years ago, in March and April, we're in a very dark spot. But at the same time, again, investors such as yourself,
Was
you
COVID
did.
a blessing in disguise for you?
I mean, I would say the first few months was really tough. I
Right.
mean, look,
Nobody
we're
knew
very
at that
fortunate.
time.
Yeah,
Nobody was aware of what's going on. So,
we're very fortunate
correct.
in the grand
And then
scheme
for
of things.
telemedicine, it became really a blessing, right? You see how.
Yeah, and so we didn't go in telemedicine, but adoption of digitization of tools in healthcare became accelerated. So texting and intake forms and
Do you think you
online
missed out that opportunity?
on telemedicine.
Yeah.
I was not always a big fan, like personally, on telemedicine, and not because I don't believe in telemedicine, but because to build a telemedicine in a matter of months requires a lot more infrastructure, and we just did not want to go in that direction. We did other things, like we did a virtual waiting room. We saw a lot of inefficiencies because even today, patients have to wait outside in the car. There's a lot of back and forth. So we designed more efficiency tools, but we did not go in the telemedicine route, and we just felt that it was a crowded market, and we would not know what to do, whereas the players were already there doing for many years before us.
How do you kept yourself away from the market, like competition, ZocDoc? There are plenty solutions out there for patient engagement. What kept you focused on what you guys were developing and what was generating results for your clients?
We just felt that there was a gap in the market. There's no doubt there's many competitors, and to the folks who are listening, competition shouldn't scare you, because we had some very well-funded competitors who had thousands of practices, but we knew our value prop existed because there's a gap in what they were servicing. Now they start seeing that we're coming in, and they start closing those gaps. But that's the beauty of startups. Startups drive innovation.
Mhm.
When startups such as Daco start coming through, it forces the incumbent players to start react to that. But because we're a startup, we always will move faster than a larger company. And so that's kind of like where we felt, was that the competition exists, but they've been there for like 10 plus years.
Mhm.
Their support system may not be as good. The product has got a little bit stale, and so that's where we grow innovation and provide more value and better support. And our customers felt that, look, that's a decision worth switching from X competitor to Doctible. And so, but we don't want to be left in that same situation ourselves right now, right? I mean, now we've grown in the last 5 years. So how do we stop becoming the meat for the next startup that's coming on? So we have to focus on innovation, better products, better support. So that
How do
engine
you
never
see?
stops.
How do you see? How do you foresee where do you are living in next 2 years, 3 years, or maybe 5 years?
In terms of like how the company
Yeah.
direction, I think that we just have, our mission is to help healthcare providers be efficient and profitable using technology. And so we really feel that there's so many more gaps as the patient demographics change. And if you look at like patients who are younger are entering into the healthcare arena, the way they consume healthcare is going to be different than how their parents would have been. And so if you look at, like, there's an expectation, like this is a generation that expects food delivered to their door. It expects like the on-demand culture. And so how do I engage with my provider? How do I book an appointment? How do I get documentation to them? there's still so much where it's
It is
highly
amazing. I am
inefficient.
amazed every day when I go and look into the EMR of a doctor. Like one of the things I really wanted to see, um, why we have so much technology going on, so much integration going on between hospitals, we have exchanges, we have all of this. Why there is not a simple system where patients can go and see their medical records in one click? I
So
mean,
walled
I have
garden,
five
yeah,
doctors. I
yeah,
get reports from five different places. Why can't I go at one place and see it? Simple.
yeah,
When the
that's the
data is
challenge.
already available.
Yeah, it's all walled gardens. So unfortunately, different EMRs have it closed inside that. There's rules, regulations, whatnot. But that's the opportunity too,
Huge
right? And
opportunity.
yeah,
Huge opportunity. And people don't. Well, somebody asked a question, what's your take on being transparent about your ultimate goal with the investors, considering that not all of them would be on the same page? That's a
I
good
think that
question.
would be yeah, that's a great question. I think that's an important question to start talking about it during the course of fundraising itself. So you don't want an investor to join in, and then you start having your conversations about, hey, here's what I need to be doing.
Yeah.
And now if they're not on the same page, I can tell you that investor relations is an important piece to an entrepreneur and a CEO's job. And so that starts from the time you're recruiting the investor, and so you do need to talk about your exit potential and opportunities right as part of the approach. Because if you think that you're going to sell for X and the investor wants 4X,
Right.
well, you have a dissonance right there. And
Right.
you're better served to not bring that investor, even though it sounds good that he or she is going to write a big check. Well, the problem is that they're not going to let you exit, when it comes time, because they may have blocking rights. And so you want to start having these conversations about what do you think you can do. And so talking about your exit as part of your fundraising process is important. And that's what I would say is that you now, I'm not saying that they'll prevent being on not being on the same page. There have been times when someone has joined and now market around you has changed significantly, so that expectations increase. So you do want to have those constant iterations, but again, you want to bring good investors. Like, for example, when we went through a transaction and I went to our board, I went to our investors such as Kunal, and I said that this is our local maximum. This is the best deal that I think I can bring to the table. They have the trust to say, I believe what you're saying, but that trust relationship was built not for that moment, but over the last 5 years, because I was giving them updates on where the business and the industry lies. So it is a lot about, I mean, end of the day, this is a relationship based business. So to be on the same page, it requires work constantly with the investors and working with them to understand that here's the reason why I think you want to exit at this thing, because we think that this is the best case for our shareholder value.
So we just had an institutional capital, right, invested into the, and that's the reason some of our small investors like us, we got the exit. So when this happens, do you get this question all the time that why should the small investors get exit when institutional capital comes in? How do you handle this situation? Because it's sometimes I might say no, I don't want an exit. I want to stay with an institutional capital. So
For
who
sure.
decides about all those things, and how do you guys determine and make the decision?
These are delicate conversations nonetheless. I mean, in our case, we had a transaction where it was a merger. And so, for example, like investors such as yourself, Kunal, you were part of the roll up too, and you'll continue to see the benefit of it. Now, not in all cases does that happen, but a lot of this comes through in your deal documents too. So the way
So
you structure a deal.
institutional investor decides mainly because he brings in a lot of money, or
It's going to be a negotiation, right? And it's also going to be
negotiation.
based on the documentation that you signed as an investor into the company, where you may have pro rata rights where you can't just be wiped out. Now, unless there's a down run and other bad situations. But for the most part, if you've structured your deal, and that's one advice I would say to even folks who have started off the company, is make sure that your structure of the company and your deal documents all are done correctly, because the like
And
the
what did you guys do? Did you guys use a professional company
we
or
did. So we had a national law
money?
firm do it, right? And it's expensive, but I'll tell you that five
It's
years later, that issue did not happen because the deal was structured correctly right from the get-go. If you want to be cheap and use like a solo lawyer who has never done this before, you might be okay today, but 5 years from now, when you have to actually go do the transaction, you're definitely going to run into it. So my advice is that do be a little bit more open to spend to make sure that your deal is structured correctly so that you don't have to run into some of these scenarios later on.
That's fantastic. Well, this is fantastic, is it? We have, I think I see the largest people. We have over 50 people who have joined us, and they're still connected with us. I would ask anybody who has any questions, they can post it under the comments, and we can take more questions. But this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you, Ajit, and we would be in touch. We would have, probably we would see each other. We are planning to have a conference in San Antonio soon.
Yes,
so HBMA will have a live conference. I said I have at least one guy who would listen to me and who would come to your conference if we have a keynote speaker, because he has a very good successful story. So somebody says, is this okay to share the plan B with your investors, because it might affect the whole pitch we had with them as plan A, because investors' goal is to get profit, be it from plan A or plan B. That's what he's asking.
I mean, like when you look at exit potentials, you want to list out multiple options you're gonna have an exit, right? It's not good. Like, and by the way, like I can tell you that the exit potential that I said 5 years ago is very different than the exit that actually happened, because the market's gonna change on, right?
But I think what he is trying to ask is, can we keep distance between two different type of investors, or the deal has to be same for each investor in the company? I think that's what he is trying to play. He's trying to understand that I have a set of investors. Can I hide something from a different set of investors or not? That's where he is trying to
I would say be fully transparent. I mean, that's what would lead to shareholder lawsuits if one investor feels that someone else got a better deal. You do want to keep the same deal for everyone. You do want to be transparent with them on plan A, plan B. Look,
it has to be one.
If you have good investors, they have to trust that you are working in the best interest of the company, and not for you as an individual. Now, look, you as an entrepreneur will gain a lot from this, but end of the day, you want to make a decision because you have a fiduciary responsibility to the company, right? You're probably sitting on the board too. So share your plans, share your plan A, plan B. Now, to get alignment, that's where you may have two investors who are pretty big, where they may not agree on your plan A or plan B. And as an entrepreneur, that's a very tricky spot to be in. And it will probably happen in many cases. And that's where investor relations, like bringing them to table, making sure that they understand why it's important. There's no easy answer here. You only have to explain to them why one is better than the other, but don't wait is my thing, right? If you feel that you're starting to see tension in your board or with your investor group early on, address it head on, because if you don't, they're going in divergent paths, and then it's going to be really hard to try to bring them together.
Well, that's fantastic. I think we answered all the questions. My last question: what are you going to do with all the wealth you have created? Party, philanthropy, investment in different other aspects. What are you going to do?
Like for me personally, I mean, obviously, very fortunate, of course, but at the same time, I mean, like Doctible is something that me and my co-founder built from. We built it from ground up, right? So we can't just like leave it, right? But we do want to help other entrepreneurs and focus on other initiatives where we can give back when there's many people. I mean, like you're a successful entrepreneur, you give to us, right? So there are ways that we can contribute back to our ecosystem, and so I think that's something I'm passionate about. And so it's funny that the role really hasn't changed for me, right? I mean, I still come to work every day, and
it's a cycle.
it's still the same. Like I think people think that, oh, you'll sit at the beach, but I don't think what do you do after 2 days? So you'll get bored.
It's just very difficult.
Yeah.
We cannot sit at one place.
You cannot sit in one place. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajit. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Everybody enjoyed it. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.